So Policy Bazaar is an insurance aggregator and global fintech company. It's based in India. The startup reached unicorn status by virtue of creating value for its stakeholders over the course of a decade. But rather than in the increase in its valuation by having venture capital money pumped in. Policy Bazaar's founders built the business while digital smartphones and mobile internet wasn't as penetrative as it is today. Well, many things, of course, have changed over the years in the insurance industry in particular. So here to share his words of advice for founders on realigning business objectives, strategies and resources when a force majeure situation occurs is Yashish Daya, who is the co-founder and Group Chief Executive Officer at Policy Bazaar. Moderating the conversation will be Ajay Ramasubramaniam, who is the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of startup Réseau. This discussion will help founders learn and adapt to a people-first culture. So let's join Ajay and Yashish to find out what advice they have for founders in the discussion session.
Thank you, Manisha, for that wonderful introduction. My pleasure and privilege to be having this fireside chat conversation with Yashish. Yashish, welcome to the chat. Some of the pointers that I actually had has been taken up by Manisha, but to just set the context, I mean, fantastic story of a startup which has reached unicorn status by creating value for your stakeholders, customers over a course of a decade, rather than many companies where we actually hear of them kind of a unicorn status by virtue of the valuation, which is largely VC money being pumped in. But for you, in case of Policy Bazaar, starting out back in mid 2000s, when probably smartphone penetration wasn't as much, I guess times were very different. Building a company and getting it to a unicorn status built over a decade. So for the benefit of our audience, if you can talk us through the journey building a digital venture when smartphone penetration and mobile internet wasn't as penetrative as today, how has Policy Bazaar evolved over the past 12 years?
So see, back in 2008, when we started, 85-90% of the traffic was on desktop, and the entire application was built for desktop. And that also limited your scope of the applications in terms of what all you could do, real time, etc. Today, it's the other way around, where 85% of everything is coming from the mobile and increasingly from the app. I think the application stays pretty much the same. It is just the scope of what all can be done has dramatically changed. For example, if you look at car insurance, of course, the comparison stays the same. However, today you can do things like inspections, things like driver tracking, things like claims assistance through the mobile, which could not have been imagined earlier because smartphone penetration wasn't so ubiquitous. So I think at heart, the consumer proposition is still the same, but the scope of applications has widened dramatically.
Great. Thank you for that. So I'm sure that you would have seen a popular meme that has been doing the rounds over the past few weeks, months, quarters, how it started, how it is going. And it's more or less an all-purpose meme which has actually spared no one for the good or the bad. And I think when it comes to insurance as a domain or an industry, I'm sure that, with the pandemic, people starting to value life and health generally more than earlier. How have you seen the insurance industry overall being impacted by the current situation that we are on?
See, it's a seesaw every month, not by the year. And the industry is a large industry. It is not used to such massive swings in demand. So April, for the industry, I'm speaking, not just Policy Bazaar, demand fell dramatically. Then in June, July, there was very high demand for health insurance and for some specific products around term insurance, etc. Again, the demand has come down because people are having a lot of difficulty bringing capital to purchase all these policies. So people are having difficulty with their income. So it's been a very topsy-turvy ride for the industry. And every month, so I'll just give an example. The health insurance industry or the specific players in July grew by about 60% year on year, while in November it's back to 13%. So it's not like an annual trend. It's not like a singular trend. It's sort of been all over. And the life insurance industry, for example, fell by about 20% in November. So you've got all kinds of trends happening. Motor insurance wasn't selling earlier because people were not driving. Now people are driving. So motor insurance is pretty much back to pre-COVID levels. So yeah, and I think the story is still to play out. It's not fully played out.
Sure. So we started talking about Policy Bazaar, and then you've spoken in general about the insurance industry. Going a little bit broader, when we talk of the startup story and the industry in general, I mean, you and Policy Bazaar is obviously in an exclusive unicorn club in India, to say, and you'd be chatting with other unicorn founders and some soonicorns that you might be talking to as a mentor, advisor, so on and so forth. I mean, what it definitely is not business as usual. I mean, how much ever we may want to believe, so it definitely is not. When you talk to such growth stage companies or unicorns or the soonicorns, what has the general mood and perception been like? I mean, from your perspective.
So I think people are very proud about how well their teams have adapted very rapidly. People are mostly comfortable with the achievement. So, if you look at industry by industry, there's some industries which have been very badly impacted, but even they are holding their, chin up and continuing bravely. And the ones who've been impacted positively are, of course, happy about. See, most of the companies and most of the founders I interact with are in the digital space. And we are seeing unprecedented demand for digital companies from a shareholder perspective. Right? You've just seen what's been happening in the last 2 days with DoorDash, with Airbnb, adding $165 billion of value within 2 days. So I think there's a lot of excitement around people, and especially people who were unicorns, to access public markets. We see a lot of that. Almost everybody that I know of is planning to somehow get to the public markets, because clearly the public markets are valuing businesses very well right now. But there's a sense of pride. There's a sense of achievement. There's a sense of purpose. And the future to everybody seems to be not so negative. Or rather, I would say is quite bright to people.
Okay, so that kind of actually plugs in very nicely to the next question I have for you. So we keep hearing about growth mindset, being proud in what you do, and kind of being optimistic and blah, blah. But having said that, I mean, to quote Darwin, I mean, those who survive are not the strongest or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable to change, right? So this particular phase, I mean, the strongest is the one with the survival mindset or the growth mindset?
You need to have both. I think you need to be able to survive. And when you know you can survive, you need to grow as well. I think both are necessary. You can't only survive in today's world. See, all of us are futuristic companies. We are not valued on our present. We are valued on the future we can behold one day, right? So if we do not grow, then we should be valued just like any other offline business or any other player in our industry. So it's only for growth that we get valued. So hence, you have to have the growth mindset. That's a given. However, there will be no future. See, all of us in the digital world is a very transparent world. It's a 0-1 game. Eventually, you will either survive or not survive. If you survive and grow, you will have a lot of value for everyone, for your employees, for your customers, for your suppliers, for your shareholders. And if you don't survive, it won't be there for anyone. So I think you do have to balance. But if I was to look back at the last 12, 13 years, I think I have over-optimized survival over growth. To be brutally honest, yes, we've grown maybe 1,000 times. But I think I have always been a little more worried about the future than I ought to have been. Today, as I look at what's going on in the markets, it gives me a lot of heart and a lot of confidence that the future is much brighter than I ever imagined.
Okay. So I'll take a very different view now. Now we keep talking about, especially being in the current situation, we keep hearing and talking about unprecedented times and uncertain times and so on. But for someone who's an entrepreneur, and just like you have pointed out in the last few lines, I mean, that is what entrepreneurship is, right? I mean, it is always unprecedented, it is always uncertain, and it's not about the present or the past, or it's rather for the future that you're building. And because this session is more around founder strategies, keeping aside the whole pandemic situation, what would be your word of caution or advice for founders when it comes to realigning business objectives? And it may or may not really even be uh, caused by a pandemic situation like this. It could be several other internal, external factors which require you to realign business objectives, your strategies, and resources, where you haven't foreseen something in advance. So, your take on that, or your words of advice on that?
It will always happen. And as you grow larger, you will face more and more resistance towards that, because please appreciate, a bulk of your team, while they will be very committed to you, uh, they are not necessarily founders. And so to some extent, they like the corporate lifestyle as well, and they like the corporate decision making culture as well, and institutionalization. And that's necessary as well. As you become bigger, you have to be institutionalized, and you will face a lot of resistance from within your own organization towards dramatic change. But I believe the founder stays the only force of change, both in the direction of survival and in the direction of growth. And you will have to have the energy to energize your teams again and again, to keep moving in that direction. It's not an easy task. Uh, we had, for example, uh, about 8,000 employees on the 19th of March, and on 20th of March, everybody had to work from home. We could not have imagined how this would actually happen, but it did happen on 20th of March, largely because there was a team that could do it. But at the same time, there was also a founder who could make that decision that, yeah, today we are going to work from home, and all of us suddenly will make sure it happens. So I think, do not forget the founder's role. It's a very tough role. It's a very energetic role, energizing role. And your teams look forward to you and eventually you are the only one who's responsible. Please remember that. So for both your success and your failures.
Great. So actually, a point that you make is a part of a question that I have coming up. So I recently read an article posted on LinkedIn by Bhanu, and this spoke about fitness and entrepreneurship the Ashish way. And I picked on 2 points on that. One, because it's a topic that I love a lot, it is sports. And the second one, which you spoke about on the people culture. So going to the first one, the intertwining of sports, endurance, and entrepreneurship. If you can just relay a bit more on how it has kind of helped you build Policy Bazaar to what it is, and how founders and entrepreneurs can keep these two aspects, the sports aspects and the endurance aspect, in mind when they're building a company, and how it relates to you personally.
Yeah, I think, see, maturity, to me, this is just my own view. Maturity is very important in anything. So when you, for example, you run a marathon, you can tell the difference between a mature and an immature runner, right? So if you, for example, if you run the London Marathon, you will, within 1 kilometer, be with a group of people who pretty much you will finish with also, right? But at the same time, if you, for example, run the Airtel Delhi Half Marathon, there's a chance in the first kilometer you'll have a massive crowd around you, and by the 20th kilometer you'll be quite alone. That's the difference between a mature running group and an immature running group. And I think that is where in India sometimes I find there is a lot of, I shouldn't use the word, but a lot of, youth, a lot of aspiration, a lot of immaturity around how many of us are going to survive, and hence the survival rate is very low. So out of thousands of people, you only find 10, 12 getting to scale of any serious level, right? And I think it's very important for us as founders to build towards that scale. and to have that mature view. It's difficult, but we must spend time. We must understand our industries very deeply in order to make that happen. Of course, a sports mindset, I run, I lose, I win, that's okay. As long as you, try your best. And of course, you eventually want to win. But if you do lose, lose with a grin, as they say. And I think uh, those are important traits to take into life because they just give you a set of values where you're okay. And sports is a great equalizer. Everybody's equal. It doesn't matter whose child you are. Once you're on the field, you got to do a run. If you can be faster than the other person, you win. Otherwise, you don't. So I think similarly in today's times, especially in the internet age, it's a great equalizer where we all equal. We all have opportunities. We all have to work towards them and make sure we succeed. I think sports also gives you fitness and energy, which allows you to energize others. I'm not saying that's the only way to get it, but most people who undertake quite a bit of sports or fitness activity do tend to be quite energetic as well. And there's a strong correlation. And I think that works wonders.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. And the second point that I liked in that was the people first culture, which obviously you did touch upon, and how it is more relevant today than ever. I mean, companies have gone down the route of cutting jobs, stopping roles, and whatnot, but probably that's not the best way of going about building a business. So if you can elaborate or touch a little bit more on the people first culture.
See, I mentioned that on 19th of March, we were 9,000 people working from office, and on 20th of March, all these people were working from home. But the important part is between 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., our sales numbers were exactly the same on both 20th of March and 19th of March. Now, what does that tell you? All these people had connectivity, operations, were dealing with customers. All of this happened without the office. That cannot happen unless you have a very deep and committed team who suddenly, because it is not just a question of technology, it's also a question of people getting up in the morning and being on their numbers and the technology working. And even for a small thing like this conference, you and I had to be here, we had to log in, we had to know what to pin, we had to do all of that stuff. Somebody has to guide us, right? Imagine that happening for 8,000 people who all have to deal with customer queries, customer requests. It all happened. And the only way that can happen is if people are deeply committed beyond just their job, deeply committed to purpose. And hence, eventually, we spend more time in our work environment than we do with our families. So how are our co-workers not as important to us as our family? Given, you get it, right? Basically, we spend in a week, I think we spend about 30 hours with our families, and we spend about 70, 80 hours with the work group. So it is family. How can it not be family?
Yeah, and that's where probably even the adaptability part or being able to kind of stitch things together, bring things together to ensure that it is a seamless kind of a plug-in. I think the role of the founder, or there is nothing.
I'll share one more thing with you where I believe, at least in India, we are wrong. And I don't know the rest of the world. What I usually find, and I was in eBookers, I was the managing director of eBookers, and I don't have any grievance, but what I found there was the founder had 98% of the equity, rest of the entire management team put together had 2%. Right? I'm saying in Policy Bazaar, management has more equity than founders, and we're very, very proud of it. My question, where founders have 95% of the management equity of any company, is honestly, is the founder going to build it all alone? And why should management work for founders who do not share equity? Right? I have a very serious question. Everybody says they take care of management, but do they? And I think the most published figure, if you really want to see whether somebody is taking care of management or not, is management equity versus founder equity. And that ratio is very critical. So, and I think founders need to be honest about it and kind of put a lot into the management.
Yeah, no, completely agree on that one. And I think it's a very, it might be a very divisive kind of point for a lot of them to have, or very borderline, but absolutely. I mean, it is people who run the show for you, run the business for you. And why shouldn't they kind of be a stakeholder in the business so that they take more ownership? And like you said, it is family at the end of the day, right? I mean, any business that you own, you operate, it is family, because they are the ones who are going to kind of probably bring food on the table for so many else that you support. So
yeah, and my view is I do know some founders who do not do this, but then they also do not say that they take care of the team. They say, no, the team gets a salary, they do their job, and then they go home. If you want them to be to consider the job like their family, then then share. Otherwise, yeah. So I know one founder who does not give any equity to any management. He says, you want to buy it, you buy it. And that's fine. And he does very well. He does very well, by the way. But he's crystal clear about it. If you value the equity, buy it. Otherwise, don't take it. And he says, I pay you a salary. I pay you a market salary. Do your job. Go home. I don't expect more than that. But, one's got to be clear where they are. I think it's unfair where you say, hey, I want more from you, but I don't want to give you more.
Got it. So we are almost down to the last part of the chat, and we always keep talking about the India and Bharat divide. And I've had conversations with folks at Policy Bazaar, which kind of was spun out at some point from Policy Bazaar. And I know of how the divide between the urban and semi-urban or rural goes. So for Policy Bazaar, and because insurance is again a topic or an area where the penetration has been fairly low traditionally, and it is only now kind of picking up. How do you see Policy Bazaar kind of breaching that divide or breaking that divide, and seeing that there is more awareness, advocacy, and insurance as a subject matter? It gets into other parts.
Sure, Ajay. Today, only 4% of our country people have proper health insurance, or life insurance is even lower. Our middle class is about 25%. So my view is, yes, I could pay lip service to the 75% or the 60%, but the 40% itself is not insured. So for the time being, my primary objective, and being a socialist country to some extent, we do. The government schemes do provide some succor to the really poor, right? So the below poverty, about half the population does get handled that way. Is the remaining half, I think, is the missing middle, which is really not getting financial support right now in terms of insurance, in terms of lending. There's a huge missing middle. The entire non-salaried class is in a very difficult spot. And it's not just rural, it is a lot of SMEs, a lot of people are in a difficult spot. And I think a lot of support is required in all that area. I think for the time being, the government is handling the insurance needs of the below poverty line.
Yeah. Cool. I'll come to the last question, after which probably we can take some questions from the audience. From an innovation standpoint, because even given the way IRD is opening up a sandbox, and a lot of insurance companies are getting into the fray to launch their innovation programs and whatnot, what are the areas in which you see within InsurTech where there could be more happening, or there's an opportunity which people do not? So everyone talks that, hey, insurance is not something that I wake up and think first thing in the morning. If you talk to people in the larger BFSI fraternity, that's the story, or that's the thing that many would talk about. But as someone who's been in the broader insurance domain for fairly long, and with Policy Bazaar as an InsurTech, what are the areas where there are opportunities that founders, entrepreneurs, people who want to start companies should start looking at?
I think both the customer service and the claims area is where a lot of innovation is required. Insurance is still waiting for its UPI moment, where there are easy rails available for customers to be onboarded, as well as claims paid in a seamless electronic adjudication manner. I think both of those will be a reality within the next 3 to 5 years. And a lot of companies should put in their energies in that area to make sure we as a country are able to evolve to where a customer doesn't need to think about once he has paid, will he get the policy? And doesn't need to think about once he's paid, will the claim be paid? That is an automatic thing which just happens. And I think I speak with a little bit of maturity there, not just that pay all claims, but an auto adjudication process which makes sure is a genuine claim, is it not a genuine claim? That whole process has to get automated to bring more confidence in the insurance industry, and that will make the industry grow. And we really look forward to that, because as that happens, we would definitely benefit from that, because we're trying to get customers on board. And their principal question is, hey, will I get my claim? Hey, will I, get service properly? So a lot of effort going from our side, but I think a lot of other people should come in and kind of move the needle there.
Great, thank you for that. So I think with that, I would like to conclude my set of questions for you in this conversation. We open up the chat where people can probably ask questions, and I can read it out, and we can take a couple of questions there. So I would need the help of the session moderator here to get us access to some of the questions. Come on, audience, we have a solid unicorn founder from India here with us for next couple of minutes. If you have any questions around founder strategies and basically to navigate the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic has caused, please drop in your questions and we'll be happy to take them.
Maybe, Ajay, we do not have questions. So some of the things that I could mention is when we were starting Policy Bazaar, I met with one other founder who told me, look, times will keep changing. There'll be good times, bad times, all that kind of stuff will happen. And I think we've seen the entire cycle from 2008 to then the boom of 2013, 14, and the continuous boom, which has just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But at the same time, I think as a founder, we must always know that these booms can't last forever, as the busts didn't last forever either. And we honestly don't even know whether we're in a boom or a bust, because it's just there's a tremendous amount of capital available for all of us. So I think being bold is a good thing in this stage for any founder, because you can't really go wrong being bold. Given execution is in shortage and capital is not in shortage.
Cool. So I'll just kind of log off. Thank you so much, Yashish, for being a wonderful speaker, co-panelist, and answering all the questions. And I'm sure that all the audience and the attendees have kind of found some nuggets, gems in terms of founder strategies, not only to overcome the pandemic, but also in general around building a company, the culture and people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you for having me over. Thank you for helping through this, the negotiating through this entire conversation. Thanks.
Thanks. Cheers. Take care.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much for that. And despite the technical difficulties, they just proved that when you go with the flow, it all works out just fine. So we were hearing there from Yashish Dahiya, who is the co-founder and group chief executive officer at Policy Bazaar, some great insights. And moderating that conversation was Ajay Ramasubramaniam, who's co-founder and chief executive of Startup Réseau. And the discussion was all around, advice for founders. All of them who were tuning in can take away some really good learning points from that session to help them weather any tough times ahead.